Hey, welcome to a new episode of Becoming Ourselves. This episode is going to be a little bit different. So Jesse just graduated college. Congratulations to Jesse. And he is on a road trip right now, so we're not hearing from him this week. But what we do have is I've got a really fun episode. This is an interview that I did a year and a half ago. I did it at the beginning of 2021. At the beginning of 2022, with Kyle Hagge. Kyle has been promoted a couple of times since this interview, but he works in community and content at Morning Brew. I took Morning Brew's first Business Essentials Accelerator course last spring, a little over a year ago, and now I am joining their new cohort, the Business Analytics Accelerator. And so I thought this was timely to bring Kyle back on the show and re-air this episode. This is an exciting one because Kyle is someone that truly, I think, embodies what we try and talk about here at Becoming Ourselves. He's someone that is intentional. He's someone that is thoughtful. He's someone who is truly healthy, wealthy, and wise in a lot of different ways. I've learned a ton from Kyle over the last probably 2 years that I've known him. He's someone that every conversation we have, I get a lot out of. He's someone that is always working to build relationships and facilitate relationships between other people. He's someone that is always going the extra mile for the people that are around him. And that's something that is just huge, is just really, really cool to have around. So I won't ramble on a whole lot further, but jump into this conversation. Kyle talks about community, which is something that's hugely important for us at Becoming Ourselves. Kyle also talks about learning, about expanding yourself, and about being intentional with your career. So very important conversations, and I think there's a lot of good meat in this episode. And so enjoy the next hour. This is one last little caveat. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's no video with this. It's just an audio recording. I don't have like a video recorded of this. So it's just, the video's not going to be that interesting, and that's nothing really that we're going to do about that. So enjoy the audio, and this is probably one that's best experienced through Spotify or Apple Podcasts, which we're on now. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, and we'll chat with you next week. Okay, Kyle, thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm really excited to have you. And appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Great to be here.
Yeah. So Kyle, you work at Morning Brew. You work for the Morning Brew Accelerator program, which I'm going to be in this winter. I'm really excited about it. And can you talk a little bit about, we're kind of going out of order on the show notes. Talk a little bit about the Morning Brew Accelerator program and how you got involved with Morning Brew.
Definitely. Yeah. Life comes at you fast. You're switching up the order on me. So how I got involved with Morning Brew, probably a similar story. Obviously we have, I think, 3.5 million readers. I was one of those. Really liked what the brand was about. It was entertaining. It was engaging. It was smart. It was witty. Kept you informed, but definitely made it fun and digestible. So I was always a fan of the brand. And then I saw them put a job offering up for a community manager, or it was actually called community editor at the time, for their first ever paid product. And that is what really intrigued me. Mainly because I had seen how powerful community has been throughout my entire life. I did AmeriCorps right after college, and where I was working with 40 students that were high schoolers, really saw how we could build a community, and that could be just a huge form of leverage in their lives and in my life. I then went to grad school. I was part of a small fellowship at Marquette University. That community was incredibly impactful. I had started my own media venture in Milwaukee called Bridge to City, where we were kind of bringing together people, resources, and ideas to inspire Milwaukee to action. Again, just another example of community and how impactful it could be, the progress that both individuals and, kind of collectively people could make inside community. So I was like, okay, this is like news, this is business, and this is community kind of combined. Three things I'm really excited and interested about. Definitely going to apply. And then fortunately got the job. I was the second/third hire on the education team at Morning Brew. We built out the Morning Brew Accelerator, which is an 8-week virtual career accelerator program, really designed to accelerate the careers of top performing professionals. and we've now ran 2 cohorts. And like you said, you'll be in the 3rd one in January. And we're building new educational products really centered around both content and community now at Morning Brew. So it's a really, really exciting time to be working for the company.
Yep. Yeah, that's really cool. I kind of like learned about the Morning Brew Accelerator through Alex's podcast, like the Founders Journal, and like through just like his documentation of like everything that he's going through as like the transition to, what is he, executive chairman now,
Yep.
out of like the day to day a little bit. And I think it's been fun to kind of like hear. I was just listening to his like podcast this morning about he wrote like a letter to himself for 2022, and I've really grown to admire like the way that everyone that I've met at Morning Brew, like the way that they are very like thoughtful and reflective about like career is not just something that you fall into necessarily, but that like, yeah, you can be more thoughtful about it. You should be more like thoughtful and intentional about the ways that you're engaging with your career.
100%. It's talking about just the people you've met at Morning Brew. I couldn't speak like more highly about the company, and really when I say that, I mean about the people that work for the company. I think there's this strain of thoughtfulness, ambitious people, but they're really thoughtful. They care deeply about, our audience or our community if it's on the education side of things. And it's really refreshing to be surrounded by like brilliant people. Like I'm like, holy shit, I'm the stupidest one here. This is great. I'm learning a lot. So it's a really special company. And yeah, to be surrounded by great people is always a huge benefit in your career.
Yeah, right. There's that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? Yeah. Like being able to be on a team that's all people that can challenge you and push you is like, I think that's the dream, right? I think we're all kind of looking for that in different ways and in our own ways. Which,
exactly. Yeah. And that's not to go too far down the MBA path unless we want to do that, but really that's a huge benefit of the program as well, is you will probably never have as diverse a network taking MBA as you'd get anywhere else. It really does. It spans geography. We have people from all over the country that take it. It spans roles. We have everyone from, entry-level positions to C-suite executives. And we have people from all different industries, from marketing, from sales, solo entrepreneurs, you name it, we have it. And that to me is the secret sauce of one of the secret sauces of MBA, is the fact that you're interacting with people that aren't like you, that might not be from where you're from, that have a much different perspective on business than you probably do. And you learn a lot from those people. And then you're able to take those nuggets and apply them back to your role or to your career. And that's where real transformation happens.
Yeah. And talking about community, right? Like in today's world, it's hard to find community, I think, in a lot of ways, right? Like we're almost 2 years into this pandemic, right? And like community doesn't look the way it did even 3 or 4 years ago, right? Because we just don't have the same in-person activities that we used to have. And some of those are coming back, but it's very different, right? And like in a world that has transitioned fully remotely, like the current job that I'm in at Intel and also the previous 2 positions, like we're 100% remote. Like I've never met anyone in person. Actually, since I graduated college, I haven't met one of my coworkers in person. And like, that's just such a different world than it was, 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that makes kind of what's happening with MBA like even more important, because like my coworkers, a lot of my coworkers on my team are like in their 40s and 50s, and like some of them have kids that are closer to my age than they are, right? And it's just a strange situation because like when you take away, I don't see them on a day-to-day basis. Like we don't have small talk the same way. We don't like chit chat in the hallway. Like we don't even live in the same state. We don't even have weather to talk about, right? Like it's so different to build relationships that way. And I think that's one of the things that makes me really excited about the MBA program, is that it's a lot of people that like are not all similar to me, but like people that have similar career goals maybe and similar like stages of life, and that I won't be the only person who's in their mid-20s.
Right. It's once you take weather away, I mean, what else are we going to talk about? That's really tough.
Really.
No, I think you're hitting on something really important. Obviously, it's not breaking news, but COVID was extremely disruptive. Not only did we lose a lot of people, unfortunately, and very sadly, but it disrupted everyone's life. and the way we live, the way we work, the way we communicate, the way we interact. I'm still a big believer that we are, social creatures and we want to interact in person. But I think all of us have now experienced some of the joys, there's downsides, but some of the joys of interacting virtually as well. And what I think is, probably, if not one of the most important factors in your career is the weak ties that you have. And I think, you said it best, when you're not in an office, when you're not kind of like going out to lunch, when you're not able to go to the kind of the spots you used to go to and see some people that maybe aren't really close friends, but you'd get to know and you could maybe call on them for a favor every now and then. We all lost that. And the beauty of programs like MBA is, all right, now I've just filled this gap in my life with 149 other people that I don't know super well, but we're going through something together. They're committed to helping me. I'm committed to helping them. And it's those people that tend to give you like the most amazing opportunities in your life. Like, it's the weak ties. It's the people that they're not super close to you. They're not, your best friends from forever. You've already internalized a lot of those opportunities, but it's the people that are committed to you. You're committed to them, but you maybe just met. You're not super close. That have the best perspectives, that have cool opportunities. And it's been amazing to see the connections and, opportunities that people have had through the program because of those weak ties that eventually get stronger as time passes.
Yeah. Yeah, and those like shared experiences, right? That like it's hard to have shared experience in a virtual world because there's just so many different opportunities, right? That like I don't have the same shared experiences with my coworkers because we're working on things, but when we're not working on things, we rarely get on a Zoom call just to chat, right? Like that's just not something that happens the same way and doesn't happen very often. And virtual happy hours, much as I love them, don't hold up the same way.
It's I love what you're bringing up. I'm a big believer that you form community through content or through like shared experience. I think community. Look, it's in my job title. I've probably benefited from it, but let's be real. It's been the buzzword of the last year, and it's like half bullshit. Like everyone's just saying community all the time. And it's like innovation like 3 years ago. There's always this word that pops up that everyone's like, oh, you need to have this, you need to have that. And there's nuggets of truth, but a lot of it ends up being hype. But to me, when you boil it down, like people want to connect, but just putting people together in a Slack chat isn't how you form genuine relationships or genuine connection. I do think that people have to go through something together. And again, that's why these cohort-based courses, I think, are becoming very popular. Yes, you are learning a lot about business or whatever your cohort-based course is focused on, but you're also connecting to people. But that connection wouldn't happen unless you're doing something together. So we have people do case studies together. We have people do virtual board meetings together. We have people interact, via text on our community platform. And it's through going through those shared experiences that you actually get to know people. It's like playing sports. You didn't know people at the beginning of the season. You get your ass kicked together like 10 times by better teams, and you're like, hey, now we're friends. And that in some ways how you form community. So I really think taking community away from this simple, you're all in a Slack together, and really thinking through how do you give people wonderful experiences where they'll learn from each other and through the content, and really form that genuine community is super important.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at like often like people's best friends like come from work, or they come from like church maybe, or they come from like college, and it's like things where you show up consistently in the same place a lot, and you like have this shared experience, this shared interest, this shared all of that. So I think that's one of the reasons that I'm like so excited about MBAs, because it's easy to not have that. Like it's so easy to just skate by and to just there are no shared experiences with me and my friends right now. And like I think that's why I'm excited, because it's an intentional way to like foster that and to build that.
100%. I mean, even before COVID, it was probably hard as an adult to make friends. Like it might just be the elephant in the room, but like as you get older, you're like, damn, I don't have any more friends than I used to, 5-10 years ago. It's because all of those shared experiences that were pretty much built into our lives were taken away because you gained independence, and now there's not school that you go to every day, or church that you go to every day, or organized sports that you go to every day. You kind of have to start creating those opportunities for yourself. And that's where people can get a little uncomfortable. They don't put themselves out there for a variety of reasons, and it can get very isolating. And so, yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Anytime you can have a shared experience with other people, go for it, because at the bare minimum, you're going to walk away with, 5, 10 really, really good friends.
Yeah, definitely. And that's I think the core of all community is like that shared experience and being able to build that in. Yeah. That's cool. So you mentioned something, this is again off script, but you mentioned something earlier about the boardrooms in like MBA, and the boardrooms we've talked about before. It's a cool idea. It's kind of loosely connected to Adam Grant's like challenge network idea, where you have people that you trust, who trust you, who are able to like give you genuine and honest feedback in your life. How have you thought about like being able to develop that outside of a cohort like MBA?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's something that probably everyone should have, whether you can develop it without some form of, I can't think of a better word, but like distribution. Like, I could go on Twitter and be like, hey, I'm looking for 5 other people that, want to get together once a month and talk about shared professional challenges. I could probably crowdsource 5 people, and hell, I probably should do that. Because I've seen the benefit of people doing that in NBA. So, again, I would go to the people that aren't your friends, because you're already kind of getting that with your friends. Like, you'll call up your friends, you'll text them with your day-to-day problems. Again, you've kind of already like internalized all their expertise and all their advice. And then obviously people that you don't know, you can't ask. So really thinking through like, who are some people, maybe that person at work that I kind of know, but I don't work with very closely. That's a great person to ask. An old friend from college that you've lost touch with. Think of those people that are on the outskirts of your network, because they're going to have the most different perspectives, the most different outlook. And you haven't heard from them. You haven't really internalized their advice. So try to find those people and get something set up. It is easier if you go to a program like MBA or the other cohort-based courses, or some sports league or a book club or whatever it might be. People that are kind of outside of your normal life, get 5 together and like talk about shared professional challenges. Not only are you going to feel way better about what you're going through, but I do think it's an incredible opportunity for leadership development. We talk about this all the time in MBA. Everyone thinks leadership is, I don't know, like a grand strategy, or really understanding lifetime value or customer acquisition costs or gross margins. And all that stuff is super important, but I'm a big believer that leadership comes down to people and understanding and connecting with people. And that's something that I don't think enough of us get enough practice in. And so just hearing other people go talk about their professional challenges, really developing that compassion and that empathy you need as a leader, thinking through great strategies, how to frame them so people take them the right way, stuff that's really, really important that you can develop in these board meetings.
Yeah, you're kind of like hitting on that idea of the weak ties again, right? That like it's not all those strong connections, it's not all those closest friends, it's not all of that sort of thing, but it's instead like the weak ties, kind of the secondary relationships that I think are harder to build right now in COVID. That like I'm still in touch with my closest friends. We still call and text each other.
Right.
Like I still go see them, but it's those second tier connections, like not second tier people, but second tier connections that like those are the relationships that like I'm probably not just gonna call up and chat for an hour, right? And like it's harder to maintain those relationships. But I think it kind of talking about community and then also talking about this idea of like the challenge network, like both of those are built on the weak ties. Like they're built on those second tier connections, those second tier relationships, which I think speaks to their importance and speaks to how much they matter.
I agree with you 100%, Joel. And it's interesting. I'm reading The Defining Decade right now. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but
I'm not.
You should definitely check it out. It's really, really good. It's mainly targeted for people 20 somethings. That's like who she's writing the book for. But I think honestly, at any age, people should read it. And one of the main things she's talking about is weak ties. And it's really been top of mind for me, both through MBA and now through reading this book. So if people need a book suggestion, The Defining Decade, check it out.
That's cool. What a great plug. Who's it written by?
Her name is Meg J, I believe. She's a clinical psychologist, PhD, and she had a practice, and she would often talk to people, 20 somethings, and she would hear a lot of times in the media that, oh, your 20s don't matter. 30 is the new 20. 20 is about experimenting and doing all this stuff. And she just talks about actually, 20s, your 20s are important, and they kind of set the foundation for the rest of your life. Not to say that you shouldn't experiment, and we'll probably get into range a little later. Not that you shouldn't, try a bunch of different things and sample a bunch of different things, but, you should take them seriously, and you should be thinking about some of the stuff that they'll be the foundational for. It's been a great read for me.
That sounds like a really good one. I had a mentor, kind of like what you're talking about. I had a mentor in college tell me that like I shouldn't do any sort of like self-reflection until I hit 30. And he was like, your 20s are just put your head down, just get a job, make some money, just go work. And then when you turn 30, you can like start living your life. And he told me that when I was like 21. I was like, I don't want to spend the next decade of my life just waiting to turn 30, right? Like I want to be able to like learn and grow and do some experimenting and do some, we probably are going to talk about range, but like be able to do some like experimenting and figuring out what it is that I do want to do. But no, I want to live in my 20s, right? I want to be able to go like travel and get these experiences and like really grow and set the foundation, like you're saying, for the rest of my life. I don't just want to wait until I'm older, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. And the other thing about that is just like no day is guaranteed. And so, it's quite easy to be like, oh, I'll just keep doing this until I hit this point and then I'll start my life. And then you get to that point, oh, I'll do this for another 10 years and then I'll start my life. Your life starts now, and that doesn't mean that you have different priorities as you grow and change and get older or have a family. But I'm very weary of any advice that says, wait until this future date and then start living.
Yeah, me too. Because like we talk about on this podcast, and like the idea of stoicism talks about memento mori, like the idea that we are going to die, right? And that we don't have like, who knows how long away that is, right? Like that could happen today, tomorrow, next week, next year, 100 years from now, right? Like we don't know, but no day is guaranteed, and we can't just put things off forever because we're not going to live forever. And so you can't just put it off indefinitely, because at some point you got to start living.
Right. I mean, think of what COVID did to so many people. Fortunately, I had not lost anyone close to me, but obviously lots of people across the globe have. And, what it did make me realize is, just how important my relationship with like my parents is, and, how probably I was always like, oh, like I'll just talk to them tomorrow. And, COVID just laid bare like, hey, there might not be a tomorrow for everyone. And so if you have something important to say to someone, you should say it, while they're still breathing, so they can hear it. The last thing you want to do is, never get the chance to tell someone how you really feel about them.
Yeah. The worst time to like be truly honest for the first time is in a eulogy. Like you want to do it while they're still here, right? Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Okay, that got a little bit morbid, so let's shift gears a little bit.
I'm sorry, I keep talking about COVID, man. My bad.
No. I mean, we've been talking about it for 2 years. It's hard to avoid.
True.
But we right before we started recording, we were talking about your favorite holiday, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. So I want to hear the way that you think about like New Year's resolutions, planning for the new year, reflecting on the past year. Do you buy into like setting New Year's resolutions? Is that something that you do? I've heard people talk about doing like a past year review, writing a letter to yourself, focusing on skills instead of goals, or just like traditional New Year's resolutions. How do you kind of think about approaching the new year, reflecting on the last year, or how that impacts you?
Yeah, for sure. So 100% New Year's is my favorite holiday, mainly for, not for the ball drop, but for the reflections and just for the chance to take stock of where your life is at and set some goals. So I won't get prescriptive for anyone else. I think if you want to write a letter to yourself, go ahead. If you want to make goals, go ahead. If you want to focus on skills, like whatever is going to be the most effective for you, go for it. I will say, I do think there's this strain of thought that's like, oh, it's a new year, but like it's just another day. It doesn't mean that you're going to change. I would push back a little against that. There's a researcher, a doctor, Katie Milkman, and a lot of people have studied this too, but she has a lot of studies on like the fresh start effect, where your birthday, a new year, anything that's kind of a new situation actually is more effective at changing habits than just like a random Tuesday in June. And so I actually do think there's, some science behind this idea that you have a fresh start. It feels like you have a fresh start. So if you're going to pick up something new, that doesn't mean it's going to work and you don't need to try or work at it, but I think it is the perfect time to start to really think about that. So, this year, my focus is really on being intentional. I kind of chose a word this year, and that's intentionality. I want to be really present with kind of every conversation I'm having. I don't want to be thinking about a tweet or scrolling on my phone and talking to someone. And so, just trying to be really intentional with my time is my big goal. And how that looks in practice is I've been actually time blocking a lot more things. I'm allergic to calendars in the past. I feel trapped by them. I don't like to have a time block for anything unless it's, a meeting or something. But I've actually found it to be very effective in the kind of the week I've been test running it, even just putting on check Twitter for 30 minutes. All right, I know I'm going to do that later, so I don't need to do that now. So that's my resolution. But overall, I'm a big fan of, goal setting and resolutions and the fresh start effect. And, my advice is also don't get so intensely focused on a goal that if you don't hit it, it, causes your whole life to shatter because you'll give up by March. Be realistic and understand, we're flawed and we won't hit 100%, but go for it.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I talked to my brother pretty recently about, and actually we did it on this podcast, but we talked about time blocking like you're talking about, and the idea that we want to make appointments for our time, that he talked about he doesn't keep a to-do list. Instead, when he has something that he needs to do, he blocks it out on his calendar, because if it's not on his calendar, it's not going to happen. And so it's cool that you bring that up also, because we were just talking about that, and I think it's something that I have not really been doing in the past, and something that is on my list of things that I want to start trying in the new year. But
I love it. And I'm just going to give book recommendations. I guess this is what the podcast is turning into. Check out Make Time by John Zeratsky and Jake Knapp, two former Google venture people. They wrote the book Sprint, actually, about the design sprint, which is a national bestseller. Then they wrote a second book called Make Time. It's all about how to make time for the things that matter most. There's 90 effective strategies for kind of doing exactly what we're talking about, being really conscientious, intentional about your time. They, have everything from time blocking to move your TV to the corner of your room. Don't make it the center, so you're less incentivized to watch TV. It's all about kind of reducing friction on the things you want to do and increasing friction on the things you don't want to do. It's a really, really great book. I highly recommend it. It had a huge impact on my life.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah, that's neat. So speaking of books, one of your favorite books, at least in my understanding, is Range, the book by David Epstein. So it's a book that I am working through right now. I'm more than halfway. And I just think it's a really interesting book because it talks about careers in a different way than we're often taught about them, especially in as people in our 20s and thinking about careers and thinking about, what do you want to do? And the advice is usually specialize as much as you can. Mm-hmm. And if you get so good at one piece of the puzzle, you're always going to have a job. But Range kind of pushes back on that. And I wanted to hear you talk about kind of your experience with that, with the book itself, and why you feel so passionately about that.
Yes. So it is true. I'm a big Range fan. If you don't know that by now, then you definitely don't follow me on Twitter. The book just was so impactful that I found so many lessons from it, and I can't stop talking about it. And David Epstein, who's the author, I think I just tweeted at him enough times where he was like, hey, I have to respond or this guy might go crazy or something. So he was finally just he sent me a copy of the book, which is really nice. And then we actually had him on the Morning Brew Twitter account to have a conversation. So that was a huge kind of career highlight for me. But yeah, the book is incredible. It'll be my third book recommendation of this podcast. What I think initially really drew me to Range is I had a very zigzaggy career. I kind of already mentioned this a little bit, but like I did AmeriCorps. So I was teaching for 2 years in a high school. And then I got my graduate degree in political science while working for the housing authority for the city of Milwaukee. And then I had this little media venture on the side, and I was working remotely for the civic tech company. And then I was doing a podcast for Marquette University and focused on innovation and leadership. And so I definitely didn't have the like, get an accounting degree, go be an accountant for 40 years and retire. And, you know, I actually don't think that the latter thing I've described, this accountant track, is actually the most common, but it's kind of what's told to us because it's the easiest to like understand. And so what was so impactful right away in Range for me is it almost gave me a vocabulary to talk about my own career. It like summarized how I felt in a language that I was unable to like conjure up myself. And so if you feel like you've had a bit of a winding road career, you have lots of different interests, or you're not quite sure where you'll end up, I could not recommend a better book than Range, because it actually speaks to how, if you get good at storytelling your career, that stuff can actually be an incredible strength. I think my, kind of main takeaway from the book is that we're all trying to find a good fit for ourselves to our career. And we're often told that you have to find that at, 18 or before. And that's not super realistic. And so the more you can sample, early on in your career, try a lot of different things to actually make sure that you have a good match. Once you find that match, then quote unquote specialize. But until you've kind of sampled enough, you can't really know what you like until you try a bunch of different things. There's a trillion lessons from the book, but it's an incredible read.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, how many huge life decisions do I want to entrust to my 18-year-old self? Right.
Right.
Like not very many of them. And so I think it's like I think it's a cool perspective to think about. It's okay that our careers don't always make sense while they're happening. And that like, I'm still pretty early on in my career. Like I've only worked a couple of jobs, and they are pretty related at this point. But like the skills that I develop and the skills that like we have and the career journey that we have, like doesn't have to be linear, and like actually probably shouldn't be linear.
Yeah.
That, like if you like, I even think about this with marketing, that I work in tech marketing right now, and that like if I get really, really into tech marketing and like pigeonhole myself in this, and then wake up when I'm 35 or 40 and I'm like, man, I don't think this is that fun. Like that's horrible. That's not something that's exciting at all. And I think like thinking about being able to sample different career paths and sample like be able to have these detours through different positions and different skills and different jobs and different, callings and all of those things really inform what we want to do, even if we end up back at the same spot, right? Like it's better to like, I don't remember who said that quote, but it's better to like go on a trip and end up back home than to not leave at all.
Yeah.
And
I dig it.
And even if like you end up back in the same spot that like your 18-year-old self did pick, like it's better that you went out and tried a bunch of things, and now you know that this is the right place for you to be.
100%. And I think a lot of people, like the tagline of the book is like, how generalists will triumph in a world full of specialization. And I think David would like admit that's like how you sell books. It's kind of punchy, but it isn't like, the moral of the book is not like, hey, you're doing accounting, but like you don't know if you might want to be a full-time ballerina. So like quit your job, go try that, and then come back. I really think what the book is saying is that sometimes in order to be the best accountant, learning more accounting isn't actually what's going to put you ahead in your career. It's, you go take a creative writing class as an accountant, and now you're learning about stuff that you've never been exposed to, and now you're thinking differently. And when you bring that talent into accounting now, it's actually more rare. You're able to like maybe think of problems in a different way. You're able to come up with innovative solutions. And there's, millions of examples in the book and in life that you can think of where someone has taken one thing from one domain, moved it into a new domain, and that's what led to innovation. Steve Jobs is probably the example that most comes to mind. He takes a calligraphy class in college. How many, people that were building computers were taking calligraphy classes, not a lot. That gave him a huge advantage. So when they went to build the first Mac, it had this beautiful typeface and beautiful fonts, and he changed computing, for the better because of that calligraphy class, which you couldn't immediately see a connection to how that would help him, but it ended up being a huge plus. And so I think that's the real underlying theme of the book, is that in order to get good at X, you don't necessarily need to keep doing X. Sometimes it's good to do Y and Z and take bits of Y and take bits of Z, bring them back to X, and that's how you're going to stand out in your career. He looks at Roger Federer or LeBron James. You would think that they only played tennis and they only played basketball, and that's how they got really good. LeBron James was playing high school in football. He was like an all-state receiver. It's the stuff you learn outside of the sport that you could bring back to the sport that makes you super unique. And just the last example I'll say is David's own career. He was a scientist. He was studying like some type of like fauna in like Antarctica, and he was going to basically be studying that the rest of his career if he stayed on that career path. Instead, he was like, I don't want to do this. He went to Sports Illustrated, and now he wasn't the best writer at Sports Illustrated because he wasn't trained as a writer. He was trained as a scientist, but he was the best scientist now, where he was an average scientist before. And so he found this niche of writing about science and sports, and that's where his first book, Sports Gene, really came from. It was him taking this incredible skill he had as a scientist, where he was average compared to other scientists, moving it into writers, and now he was like the best scientist among writers. So kind of finding that personal monopoly, like what are you really good at that you could bring into a new domain that the people in that domain aren't good at, that's where you're really going to stand out. So anyway, I don't want to give the book away, but like there's so much fascinating shit in there. It's amazing. It's going to give you a new perspective on your career and honestly on life. So definitely check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Tim Ferriss talks about like to be in like the top 1% of like a specific discipline is really, really hard, but to be in the top like 20% of 2 or 3 different disciplines and use them all in like one unique way is like suddenly you've created this new discipline that didn't exist before, and because you're one of only a handful of people that do it, it's way easier to be in the top 1%, 10%, whatever you want to put there. And so
it's it's a really interesting insight. And I also think if you're, for me, I'm really drawn to like novelty, and I like innovation. And it actually is like the best way to be innovative is almost to be a beginner. I used to run a podcast called Innovators on Tap, and the host was a CEO. His name was Chuck Sabota, a huge influence on my life, incredible business mind and leader in person. And he had a famous saying that he would tell his team. He was the CEO of Creed, this $1 billion company, publicly traded, where he would say the problem with experts is they know what's not possible. And, if you really know your shit, you're kind of boxed in. Like, you're like, no, that's not possible. No one can do that. When you're new, you just see it with a new perspective. You're really starting to quote unquote think outside the box, and you come up with ideas that like experts wouldn't necessarily have. And so both are definitely needed. I'm not like anti-expert, but when you're trying to come up with a new innovation, sometimes it is beneficial to be a beginner. I think in range, it's called the outsider's advantage. So that's something else that you can do in your career is if you feel a little out of place, actually lean into that. You're probably the most innovative person there.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. How have you felt how have you felt like you've applied range in your own career? Like, I know you talked about like you've kind of had a winding career and done a whole bunch of different stuff in your past, but like now reading the book and being in your position at Morning Brew, like how do you feel like you actually are living that out now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one of the things it reinforced, I probably was doing this before, but that it definitely reinforced is it is beneficial to read stuff outside of your discipline. So I'm constantly reading, like I'm like just read Humankind by Rutger Bregman, which is all about like how humans are actually friendlier than we think at their base level. I was reading The Defining Decade. I'm reading this history book that's kind of taking a look at like North or Native American history and how obviously like we've kind of done a shitty job explaining that history.
Yes.
And so like, it's about like sampling all of these different things in life and finding a way to take the lessons from them and apply them to your career. I think it's so easy once you kind of pick your job. Again, to go back to like accounting, like I'm an accountant. I'm really only going to focus on accounting. I'm going to read all the accounting stuff there is. That is helpful for sure. And you need to be on top of your shit. But I do think that some level, the marginal returns on that are low. And it's actually sampling things from outside of your field and finding ways to bring them back to your field in interesting ways. That's super, super important. And it just makes you like a more well-rounded person. You can connect with more people. You can understand where people are coming from. So yeah, if anything, it's reinforced that like, hey, I'm doing things right when I'm like not solely reading shit that's so obviously applied to what I need to be doing. You'll find a way to connect the dots in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, and even though like you might not be able to connect the dots right now, like you don't need to always connect the dots right now because maybe you'll connect them later.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. I like, this is one of my philosophies on life, but like before you can connect the dots, you have to collect the dots, and you have to do dot collecting. And so dot collecting is sampling a lot of different things, reading different books, traveling, doing things you're not comfortable with, taking a ballroom dancing class, whatever it might be. You have to collect before you connect. And so many people talk about, innovation or leadership or business is about connecting the dots. But if you haven't sampled enough, you don't have dots to collect or to connect, excuse me. And that's going to be a real problem.
I like the way you said that. You have to collect the dots before you can connect them. That's cool. I'm probably going to write that down. No, that's a good one. So one of the last things that I kind of want to talk about is a question that you kind of flagged as something you were interested in talking about. And that is, what is something that you think more people should do?
What is something I think more people should do?
And I think probably, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think probably like some of this ties into what we've been talking about already with like the ideas of community and the ideas of range and like challenging the status quo and being willing to like step outside of our comfort zone and also like understand that sometimes when we are uncomfortable, like that's the right thing anyway. And like I think a lot of what we've talked about already are like things that people should be doing, but I wanted to give you space to think about this kind of on a broader level also.
I definitely agree. Kind of, the whole conversation has been centered around probably things that people should do more of. Something that we haven't talked about that I think is really key, something that I should probably do more of too, is actually like writing down your thoughts or your theories on life or what have you. I think we can all relate where we feel so confident that like a certain thing we think is right, and then someone asks us like to articulate it, and like we realize that it's the most shallow understanding of this thing ever, and we've been walking around feeling so confident in it. And I actually think writing is probably the most effective way to refine and to actually like kind of like call you on your own bullshit. Like, do you actually know what you're talking about? The times I've had to write down what I actually think and like provide like good evidence and like a clear line of logical thinking, I realized that I don't know what I thought I knew. And so I would say, if you're really confident in something, try to write it down and see how confident you are after. It's a great way of like self-exploration. And then the benefit is like after you've wrote something, like you can put it out to the world. And you're going to find people that agree with you. You're going to find people that disagree with you, but I think you will make a lot of connections. And again, going back to those weak ties, those moments of serendipity, the more shots on goal, the more things you produce, the more, you put yourself out there. You don't need to convince everyone you're right. You don't need to become the most famous person in the world, but all you really need to do is for one person that can have an impact in your life to read it and connect with it. And you never know where that will lead. I started this podcast called Bridge the City, in Milwaukee that I'm no longer part of, but it is still running. And, I just started that because I really cared about the city and I wanted to focus on like civic engagement. It was really like action oriented podcast. I had no thoughts that me putting this out there would lead to some sort of job. And then lo and behold, a year and a half, 2 years of producing an episode pretty much every week, that's how I got the job at Marquette. Is they're like, yo, this dude, he doesn't have a background in podcasting. Like, I'm not an audio engineer, but like, you've been doing it for 2 years, so you can clearly do it. So there's also just like, yeah, there's just like proof of work. So, you know, I guess the other thing, like, what should more people be doing that they're not doing is, you know, don't ask for like permission to start something. If you're interested in a certain career, or you want to write, or you want to do a podcast, or you want to get into X, Y, or Z, my biggest advice is just start doing it. It's going to probably feel a little lonely for a while and like isolating, but if you like it, you'll keep doing it. And eventually after a year, like, you'll have a body of work that just proves that you can do it. And that will open up a lot of doors.
That's cool. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot recently about like that idea of asking for permission, that I think in my own life, tend to try and ask for permission a lot. Like, I want to be asking people for permission because I want to make sure that I like have some sort of approval before I like go out and do something. Right. And I've been trying to think about like, where does that come from? Is that like a fear of like, oh, if I like do a bad job, then I can blame somebody else for it? Like, or is that like where does that come from? And like, how can I kind of get past that? But no, that idea of like, we shouldn't need to be asking for permission all the time. That like, especially if it's like a new project that we want to take on, like, it's okay if nobody else wants you to do that. Like, it's okay if like nobody else knows about it or nobody else is interested in it. Like, you can still go do it, and you don't need like this broad support system that's like encouraging you to do it before you jump in. Like, in some cases, like, you're going to find that support system as you go and do it, right? Like, it's hard for people to kind of back something before it's happened.
Yeah, 100%. I think you have to, you know, it's like this podcast or the podcast I had, like, you know, I have no idea what your audience size is, but like, just take that out of the equation. Even if no one was listening, like, damn, this has been a great conversation. And if you can just enjoy the process of like doing what you like to do and not worry about like the noise or the audience number or anything like that, you know, eventually if you want to monetize or have a career, you probably have to get an audience, but don't think about that right away. Like, just start doing something and finding joy in, you know, damn, I wrote the newsletter this month. I don't care how many people read it. I'm really proud of myself. You know, commit to that and give it a year, and then come back and maybe look at the numbers and see where you can do better. But yeah, I mean, there's never been a better time for most people to like actually just start producing their own content if they're passionate about that. So, you know, go for it.
Yeah. And there's so many like free low stakes ways that you can do that, right? The ways that you can distribute that. Like, if you want to write, you can do it on Medium. If you want to do a podcast, like, you can do it on Anchor. If you want to do like writing in any social media platform, you can do that. If you want to do videos, there's YouTube. Like, you can get into pretty much any content creation hobby without putting down $1. And like, that's a cool space to be in, because it doesn't have to be like this huge investment of time and resources. Like, you can just do it. You can just start today and set up a free account somewhere, and by tomorrow have stuff live.
100%. You know, this could be a whole other podcast, but it's so interesting. Like, a lot of that, I'll speak for myself, is like ego. Like, I've had this idea for like a video series for a really long time, and I just like never have fully committed or done it. And, you know, part of it is like keeping the illusion alive that like this thing could be so successful if I just did it. And I think all of us have that bit of an ego where it's easier to be like, well, it would have been big, but I never did it for X, Y, or Z. But when you actually start to do it, you're going to find out quick, like, oh, all right, this wasn't as big as I thought it might be. And so there's a bit of like ego protection, but I would say like anything, the biggest joys in life are not going to come from, you know, inside your comfort zone. You're going to have to step out, and you're going to have to put your ego aside and start doing it. It doesn't need to be producing content. It could be for anything in your life that you think is worth pursuing. Yeah, you got to try and not be afraid to fail. You'll learn a lot of lessons along the way, either way. And then the last thing I say is, by trying, the path will illuminate itself. I think oftentimes we try to wait to see from A to Z, but there's just no way to predict what's going to happen even a year from now. And so sometimes you just have to know the next step, do that next step, and then the step after that will reveal itself.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes that I have actually written down on my wall is like, we are A to Z thinkers, and we worry about A and we fret about Z, but we forget about B through Y the whole time. And like, it's not like you can't figure out A to Z before you start it, right? Like the first thing that you need to do is you need to figure out like, what's the first step? What's the next step?
Yep.
Right. And like, yeah, it's good to have like a goal and a vision for it, right? And maybe like know which direction you're heading, but like you don't need to know how to get there because none of us know how to get there. Like everybody's just making this up. And so as you are trying to like, whether it's a new video series or like a new, project, whatever it is that you're working on, like you don't need to know all the steps. You just need to know the next one.
Yeah. And, I wholeheartly agree.
Cool. Well, we're coming up on time, Kyle, so I want to be appreciative and I want to be like respectful of that. Do you have anything else that you want to like say or talk to? We've got a few minutes left, and I just kind of want to give space for you if there's anything else that you wanted to bring up, wanted to mention that we didn't get to yet.
No, I mean, this was a great conversation, wide ranging, no pun intended. And like I was, if you couldn't tell by my long-winded like rant of answers, I was a philosophy major in college. So this was great to be able to chat once again and, talk about a lot of interesting things. And hopefully I gave some good book recommendations. So appreciate you having me on. Super excited for you to be in NBA come January. If people are interested, check us out. We're actually... Our new website.
I'll put a link in the bio.
Our new website will be live, but the website will redirect. So accelerator.morningbrew.com. And yeah, would love to have you in one of the cohorts.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Kyle. I really appreciate it. Like you said, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I used to really love saying that I ran a podcast, and now I'm getting to a point where I just really love running a podcast.
Yeah.
And I think it's fun to be in this space rather than the first space. It's way more fun now for me to jump on the phone with you and be able to have conversations like this. And it's more fun for me to like do it than it is to actually like tell people about it. So I've really loved doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it means a lot. So.
100%. And I'll leave with one more thing. I'm gonna leave with a quote. You can cut this if you don't want to, if you want to. But this is a quote that I've just been thinking about a lot lately, and ever since I heard it, it really stuck with me. And I think it's a good quote in the new year. It's from Father Greg Boyle, who runs Homeboy Industries, and it's you are so much more than the worst thing you've ever done. And so I think as we move into a new year, we all have things that we're probably not super proud of or that didn't go right in 2021 or, something that we did that we fucked up. And, that's okay. Own it. Apologize. But you still have your life to live. And don't let shame bring you down this year. Get back up there and let's have a great 2022.
Yeah, that's a great quote. I am for sure going to leave that in. Yeah, that's really good.
Love it.
That's cool. Well, thank you, Kyle.
Thanks,
appreciate it, and we'll wrap this up.
Sounds good.
Welcome to Becoming Ourselves, a work in progress podcast, where we explore how to become healthy, wealthy, and wise. This podcast is for young adults who are, like us, navigating this adult adolescence of self-discovery and personal growth.
I'm Jesse Sigrist, and every week, my brother Joel and I will bring on guests to talk about new perspectives on living a fulfilling life and developing skills along the way. From overcoming obstacles to setting achievable goals, we explore topics that are relevant to all young adults who are discovering their place in the world.
Maya Angelou defined success as liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. We often feature guests who exemplify this success and lead lives that are healthy, wealthy, and wise. These guests will often have expertise in fields such as finance, relationships, careers, or mental and physical health. Our goal is to inspire and challenge both our listeners and each other to become the best versions of ourselves.
Feel free to text us at 503-893-2664 to share your own experiences and be part of the conversation. We'll always reply. Let's embark on this journey of becoming ourselves together.